Everyone, welcome back to the World Conflict Monitor. Please subscribe and like my videos. Today we delve deep into a dramatic development, Revolt Inside the Regime, Belarus Soldiers Join Protesters, Moscow in panic. We'll analyze this from multiple angles: exterior, interior, performance, safety features, i.e. risks and safeguards, unique selling points, i.e. what makes this story compelling, price, i.e. cost and consequences, and then conclude with key takeaways. Although the product is really a socio-political phenomenon, this structure helps us see it from many perspectives. At the exterior level, what we see is the surface narrative, the public posture, the visible signals and imagery. We see Belarus, long tightly controlled by President Alexander Lukashenko, as a tightly sealed fortress of autocracy, but recently cracks have begun to appear. Reports that some Belarusian soldiers or internal security personnel are defecting or showing sympathy toward protesters. That's a huge visual shift. The uniformed agents of the regime, once pillars of its power, potentially stepping away or refusing orders. This shocks the optics and sends tremors through Moscow's corridors of influence. The regime's facade, once impervious, begins to look fissured. To observers across Europe and beyond, the interior turmoil becomes legible through exterior acts: soldiers escorting protesters, security checkpoints left unmanned, armored vehicles idle, perhaps even images of solidarity between troops and civilians. All these external signs feed into a narrative: a regime under stress, a state losing its grip. The color palette of the streets, the banners, the flags, white Belarusian national colors used by opposition, the juxtaposition of tanks and peaceful protesters, these stark contrasts become the visual language of dissent. The exterior is the image space where messaging is contested. Is this still a regime in control, or is its grip loosening? And Moscow's panic is part of the exterior landscape: signals from Russian decision makers reacting with alarm, sending warnings, reassigning assets, perhaps repositioning troops, or issuing discreet threats. The exterior stage is where perceptions matter, and in this case the regime's projections of strength start to crack. Now, turning to the interior, the deepest, most substantial section of our analysis. This is about what's happening inside the regime, inside the minds of soldiers, inside the state security apparatus, inside the ranks of protest movements, and inside the mounting strategic dilemma. The interior is vast. Inside the regime there is fear, uncertainty, and recalibration. The security services, the secret police, the interior ministry, the special forces have long been the backbone of Lukashenko's rule. Their loyalty is presumed, enforced by patronage, coercion, purges, and surveillance. But when soldiers or security officers begin to question orders, or quietly align with protesters, that internal cohesion phrase, the regime may respond by reshuffling commanders, conducting internal purges, increasing political commissars or ideological oversight, deploying informant networks, using threats or bribes to restore loyalty. There may be intense internal debate. Do we crush dissent immediately, or co-opt some demands to diffuse momentum? Which units are safe to trust, which are vulnerable to defection? These are life and death internal questions. Inside the soldiers' minds, the calculus is agonizing. Many soldiers are conscripts or career officers who have lived in a controlled system for years. To step outside orders means risking court-martial, execution, or disappearance. But joining protesters may feel like a moral and political necessity, especially if they see fellow citizens suffering, or if parts of their own unit sympathize. They may ask, will the regime protect us? Do we have backing? Will we be scapegoated? Do we believe the protest movement is strong enough to survive retaliation? Are there safe exit routes? Some may defect quietly, others make public gestures, others remain muted until a tipping point. The interior conflicts of conscience, duty, fear, and ambition play out in whispers, small acts, leaks, and clandestine coordination. Inside the protest movements, the interior is also fraught. Opposition leaders may be scrambling to integrate these soldier defectors, offering safe havens or guarantees if possible, ensuring that protests remain nonviolent, coordinating across cities, preserving communications, avoiding infiltration. They may fear that sudden escalation by armed elements could be used as pretext by the regime to crack down brutally or justify foreign intervention. They must manage internal divisions. Some protesters may want radical action, others moderate paths. They must maintain morale, supplies, logistics transport, medical care, communications. They must shield identities of defecting officers. The interior workings of coordination, information security, mobilization, intelligence, counterintelligence are all central. Inside Moscow's corridors, the interior is one of scramble, anxiety, contingency planning. Russian influence in Belarus has been systematic economic leverage, military support, security cooperation, intelligence ties. If Belarus destabilizes, Moscow loses a buffer, a strategic asset, and faces contagion. Other client regimes might be tempted. Therefore, Moscow's internal debates likely revolve around whether to intervene overtly or covertly, to prop up Lukashenko with troops, special forces, or advisors, to apply political coercion sanctions, withdrawal of aid, or conditional support, or to push for a managed regime transition favorable to Russian interests. They must also worry about NATO or EU reactions. Internal Russian optics is Moscow seen as suppressing a democratic movement, the broader conflict with Ukraine, and the risk of opening multiple fronts. Thus, the interior in Moscow is a high-stakes chess game. Inside Belarusian society, more broadly, interior dynamics include how people assess risk, trust institutions, talk in private, decide whether to show up in the streets or stay hidden. Many have suffered repression, so fear is deep, but discontent is widespread among workers, students, intelligentsia, rural areas. The interior pulse of the population, hope, fear, solidarity, cynicism, is itself a determinant of how far the revolt can go. The interior landscape of Belarus consists of networks, whispers, underground support, mutual aid, and the quiet decision of everyday people. Do I film, post online, protest, or hide? In sum, the interior is the hidden engine of the revolt. The doubts, the loyalties, the moral struggles, the secret coordination, the risk calculations, the countermeasures, and the strategic visions all swirl behind the public scenes. Without grasping the interior, the exterior acts are shallow, but the interior is fragile, contested, and decisive. Next, performance: how the revolt or the regime's response performs in terms of effectiveness, momentum, visibility, coordination, resilience, adaptability. Performance here means, is the revolt gaining traction? Are soldiers defecting in numbers? Are protests swelling? Are major cities or key infrastructures, communications, transport, power being affected? How well are protesters coordinating? Are protests dispersed or concentrated? How swift is response? Is international media amplifying the narrative? Is there effective messaging to the wider public? Are supply chains or logistics, medical, food, security being maintained? Is the regime able to suppress quickly, or is it stumbling? Are detachments of security forces refusing orders or hesitating? Are there clashes, arrests, casualties, or failed suppression attempts? In strong performance scenarios, protesters hold momentum, maintain nonviolent discipline to win sympathy, secure backing from parts of the security forces, establish safe zones, control key intersections or public squares, broadcast their message widely, and resist regime counterattacks. The regime may miscalculate, overreach, provoke backlash, or lose legitimacy. In weak performance cases, the revolt fizzles under repression, the regime beats back protests with force, communication is disrupted, coordination fails, defectors are isolated or neutralized, fear reasserts control, and the regime emerges strengthened with special purges, intimidation, and paramilitary backlash. So far, from what is reported, the performance of this revolt is tentative but dangerous for the regime. If soldier turnouts increase, if protests stay large and sustained, and if the regime fails to decisively crush them early, that is a performance advantage for the revolt and a source of panic for Moscow. Now the safety features, but in this context, we reinterpret safety features as the protective mechanisms, risk mitigations, contingencies, and stabilizing safeguards, both for the regime and for the protest movement. From the regime side, it has safety features built in. It has loyalty systems, internal informants, ideological indoctrination, security guarantees, patronage rewards, torture and punishment for disloyalty, surveillance, censorship, co-optation of elites, control of communications, blackout of protest media, and the ability to deploy military or paramilitary force swiftly. It can impose curfews, declare martial law, cut internet, use foreign assistance e.g. from Russia. It can isolate units suspected of disloyalty, reassign them, or purge them. It can provide legal immunity for loyal units, offer incentives, promotions, pay, privileges, or threaten families of defectors. From the protest movement side, safety features include decentralized organization, so cutting off one node doesn't collapse the whole, use of encrypted communications, fallback plans, redundant leadership, safe houses, rapid mobilization, international support and media attention, which raises the political cost of brutal crackdowns, solid messaging to avoid giving the regime pretexts to label them terrorists, solidarity networks for arrested or injured protesters, legal aid, medical aid, and evacuation paths for key leaders. They may also hope for diplomatic pressure from Western governments or international organizations to act as buffer. Maintaining discipline and avoiding tactical violence helps protect legitimacy, reducing the regime's ability to justify mass kills. Moreover, some defecting soldiers may demand guarantees, anonymity, immunity, safe passage, integration into protest zones rather than public declarations, assurances that their families will not be targeted, etc. These become internal safety features for them. Similarly, protest leaders must protect defectors from retribution or betrayal by regime informers. Thus, in this conflict, safety is fragile. The side with better protective mechanisms, redundancy, and ability to absorb losses has an edge. Unique selling points i.e., what makes this story compelling, attractive to audiences, what differentiates it. 1. Dramatic rupture. This is not just protest. It's the potential breaking point inside the regime. Soldiers joining protesters is an extreme escalation rarely seen. It's a narrative of betrayal within, of loyalty fracturing. That tension is gripping. 2. Geostrategic stakes. Belarus sits at Russia's western flank. A revolt here threatens Moscow's buffer, undermines its regional influence, and could catalyze further resistance in client states. The stakes are global, not just local. 3. Moral drama. The story pits power against conscience. Militarized agents are confronted with the decision, obey orders or align with citizens. This human tension makes for compelling storytelling. 4. Unpredictability and suspense. We don't know whether the revolt will succeed or be crushed. Viewers are drawn to high-stakes, uncertain drama. 5. Symbolic resonance. Belarus is seen as Europe's last dictatorship. If it cracks, that is symbolically potent, the triumph of people over autocracy, even in the shadow of a great power. 6. Media and information warfare. Control of narratives, leaks, defector testimonies, social media bursts, disinformation campaigns. The conflict of stories is itself a draw. 7. Potential domino effect. Success here could inspire protest movements elsewhere in the post-Soviet space or among Russian-controlled regions, altering broader conflict dynamics. These features make the story much more than a local revolt. It becomes a node in a global struggle for regime change, sovereignty, and democratic agency. Price, meaning what are the costs, consequences, trade-offs, and risks inherent in this revolt. The cost is very high for all parties. For protesters and defectors, there is risk of death, torture, exile, disappearances, reprisals against families, suppression, and arrest. The regime may respond with disproportionate violence, snipers, mass arrests, kidnappings, forced disappearances, summary executions. Even if the revolt gains ground, the damage to infrastructure, disruption of services, economic collapse, and instabilities may be severe. In a worst case, civil war or armed conflict could erupt. For the regime, the price of collapse is loss of power, retribution, division within the elite, potential exile, or prosecution. Even if the regime survives, it may pay by losing legitimacy, sustaining divisions, necessitating harsher policing, repressions, and deeper reliance on foreign patronage. Moscow itself might absorb strategic losses, loss of Belarus as a loyal partner, blow to influence, exposure to backlash or insurgent spillover, and costs of intervention. For the population, the price includes disruption to daily life, curfews, shortages, economic collapse, damage to public services, potential infrastructure destruction, regional instability, refugee flows, and uncertainty. If conflict turns violent, civilian casualties mount. Thus, the revolt is a high-risk, high-stakes gamble. Success brings liberation, failure brings brutal suppression and possibly worse. The price is acute and immediate lives, stability, legitimacy, and regional power balances. Conclusion, pulling it all together, what do we take away from Revolt Inside the Regime? Belarus soldiers join protesters, Moscow in panic. This is a pivotal moment. The external signs, defects, images of soldiers with protesters, regime crackdowns are signals that the long-standing edifice of control in Belarus is under stress. The interior dynamics, fractures of loyalty, moral dilemmas, clandestine coordination, and regime panic are the engines giving this moment weight. The performance of the revolt is still unfolding. Whether it solidifies or falters depends on coordination, momentum, defense against repression, and strategic resilience. Safety features are ephemeral but critical. The regime's repressive tools versus protesters' protective networks. The unique selling points, moral drama, strategic stakes, human conflict, suspense make this story compelling and consequential. The price is steep for everyone. Blood, ruin, legitimacy, regional power. If this revolt succeeds even partially, it could reshape Belarus, weaken Moscow's grip, empower protest movements elsewhere, and shift the map of Eastern Europe. If it fails, it could mean a brutal consolidation of autocracy, deeper Russian dominance, terror, and a chilling message to would-be dissenters elsewhere. Either way, history is watching, and the outcome may ripple far beyond Belarus's borders. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, and share so we can keep watching these global conflicts together.